Welcome to the Midnight Library, a place where the night feels calm, the world slows down, and stories become a gentle pathway to rest. Find a quiet spot, settle in, and let your body sink into stillness. Breathe deeply in and out, leaving the day behind. This is your time to rest, your time to dream, your time to drift. And now, let us begin tonight's story.
There is a lake, hidden far from the busy roads and the restless noise of towns. It lies still and quiet, ringed by forests of tall pines and willows whose branches lean low, as though whispering secrets into the water. And there, gently swaying on the silver surface, rests an inn. It is not like other inns. It does not stand on land with cobblestone steps and chimneys of brick. Instead, it floats upon a wide wooden platform, tethered by strong ropes that keep it steady, though the water rocks it ever so slightly. At night, lanterns hang from its beams, casting golden ripples that dance across the lake. Travelers who find their way here often speak of the inn as though it called to them. They say it is a place that appears only when needed most, waiting quietly in the mist until weary wanderers step aboard. On one cool autumn evening, a guest arrived. Her footsteps were soft on the wooden dock that led to the floating inn. The air smelled faintly of pine needles and the crispness of leaves beginning to fall. She paused for a moment, gazing out across the quiet water where the moon lay mirrored like a silver coin. The inn seemed to hum with warmth, as if it had been expecting her. Through the windows, she could see a gentle glow, the kind of light that promises tea by the fire and a soft bed after a long journey. She took a deep breath, feeling her shoulders loosen as the calm of the place settled over her. Slowly, she stepped across the gangway and entered the floating inn. Inside, the hush of the outside world faded. The scent of cedar wood and dried lavender filled the air. Lamps glowed softly on polished tables, and somewhere in the distance, she could hear the faint trickle of water, as though the lake itself whispered through the walls. A host appeared, kind-eyed, calm, and dressed in simple linen. He welcomed her as though she were an old friend returning home after many years. Without a word about her travels or how she had found the inn, he simply guided her inside, where warmth and peace awaited. And in that moment, the guest knew she had stepped into a place where time moved differently, a place that would let her rest as long as she needed. The lake stretched wide and silent, its stillness broken only by the faint sigh of the wind moving through the trees. The air carried the smell of pine, cool water, and a hint of wood smoke drifting from somewhere unseen. The last light of day lingered on the horizon, turning the water into a mirror of soft rose and fading gold. And on that surface, quietly swaying, waited the inn. It was unlike any place she had ever seen. Its wooden beams rose sturdily from the floating platform, and lanterns hung from hooks along the railing, their amber glow spilling out into the mist. Every flame shivered gently with the movement of the water, sending ripples of light gliding across the darkened lake. It felt alive, as though the inn itself breathed in rhythm with the gentle rocking of the waves. The travelers stood at the edge of the dock, listening. There was no chatter of people, no distant rumble of roads or towns. Only the soft lap of water against wood and the occasional call of an owl hidden in the trees. The stillness wrapped around her, not in emptiness, but in a quiet kind of welcome. She drew in a deep breath, and for the first time in many days, she felt the heaviness in her chest begin to loosen. The gangway leading to the inn creaked beneath her feet as she stepped forward. Each slow stride brought her closer to the glow of windows that promised warmth and comfort. She could see the reflection of her own figure moving alongside her in the water, slightly distorted by the ripples, as though the lake carried a dreamlike twin of herself into the floating inn. When she reached the threshold, she paused once more to take in the sight. The inn's wooden walls gleamed softly in the lamplight, polished smooth by years of care. Curtains stirred lightly at the windows, revealing glimpses of firelit rooms inside. A calmness, deeper than she could explain, rose up within her. It was not only the beauty of the place, but a strange sense of being expected, as though the inn had known she was coming all along. She stepped inside. Warmth folded around her instantly, carrying the scent of cedar and herbs hung to dry in the rafters. The air was touched with lavender, its fragrance soft and grounding, the kind that seemed to sink directly into her bones and coax them toward rest. Lamps glowed from tables polished by many hands, their light golden and steady, while the faint sound of water lapping beneath the floor created a rhythm like a heartbeat in the background. A figure emerged, a host, neither hurried nor distant. His eyes were calm, carrying the weight of someone who had seen countless travelers pass through yet greeted each one as if they were the only soul in the world. He did not ask where she had come from, nor why she was here. Instead, he simply inclined his head and offered the kind of smile that spoke of quiet understanding. With a slow gesture, he welcomed her deeper into the inn. The traveler followed, her boots whispering against the wooden floorboards. Her body felt heavier with each step, not from weariness, but from the gentle permission this place gave her to let go, to set down whatever burdens she had carried across the water. The soft glow of the inn wrapped around her, and she knew she had found not just shelter, but a sanctuary. The floating inn had been waiting, and now she understood. So had she. The host led her slowly along a narrow hallway where the air seemed to hum with a quiet life of its own. The floor shifted gently beneath her feet with the movement of the lake, reminding her that she was no longer on solid ground, but carried softly by water. Lamps lined the corridor, their glow dim enough to soothe the eyes yet warm enough to light every detail of the wood-grain walls. The scent of lavender lingered, blending with faint notes of beeswax from the polished furniture. They reached a door, carved with simple patterns of leaves and flowing water. The host opened it with care, as though revealing not just a room, but a space already waiting to embrace her. Inside, the chamber glowed with a soft, golden light. A bed of clean white linens and thick quilts stood ready, its corners tucked neatly, but with an inviting softness that promised warmth. Beside it, a small table held a clay lamp, flickering gently. A chair rested near the window, angled perfectly toward the view of the lake. The traveler stepped inside, her breath catching at the sight. Beyond the glass, the water stretched out in silver darkness, broken by the scattered lantern reflections drifting from the inn's deck. The lake moved with a slow, steady rhythm, rocking the inn in the same way a cradle sways in the night. She stood quietly, watching the faint lines of moonlight glide across the surface. Each ripple seemed to echo in her chest, unhurried and calm. The host set a small tray on the table beside the bed. A cup of steaming tea, fragrant with chamomile and honey, filled the room with its sweetness. He spoke only a few words, his voice low and even, as if careful not to disturb the peacefulness that already filled the air. Then he gave her a nod and withdrew, leaving her to the stillness of her chamber. Alone now, she let her hands rest on the windowsill. The wood was smooth and cool beneath her palms. She closed her eyes and listened to the water below, the sound of the lake lapping gently against the platform, carrying her further away from the noise of her thoughts. She lifted the cup of tea, sipping slowly, letting the warmth seep into her chest and spread through her body like a soft tide. Time seemed to slow inside the room. The flicker of the lamp matched the rhythm of her breath. The rocking of the inn cradled her in its quiet sway, and as she settled into the chair by the window, cup resting warm between her hands, she felt herself loosening further, as though the weight of her journey was melting into the lake itself. The night outside deepened, but within the floating inn, she felt wrapped in safety, in silence, in the gentle care of a place that seemed to exist for no other reason than to help her rest. The quiet settled around her like a blanket as the door clicked softly shut behind the host. For a moment she did not move, simply standing in the center of the room, listening. The gentle creak of the wooden beams, the muted lap of water against the platform below, the faint rustle of curtains stirred by the evening air, all these sounds seemed woven together, creating a hush so deep it reached into her bones. Her eyes wandered slowly across the room. The quilt on the bed was thick and heavy-looking, its stitching forming delicate patterns that caught the lamplight. The chair near the window seemed perfectly placed, as though countless guests before her had rested there, gazing out at the same silver water. Everything carried the sense of quiet intention, as if each piece of furniture, each candle flame, each breath of air had been arranged for one purpose, to offer rest. She moved toward the window, her boots tapping gently against the wooden floor. Her reflection merged with the night outside, faint in the glass, the outlines of her face softened by the glow of the lamp behind her. Beyond that, the lake stretched endlessly, carrying the shimmering reflection of the moon like a path of silver. The ripples shifted slowly, pulling her gaze deeper and deeper, until she felt as though the water were breathing in time with her. The tray on the bedside table caught her attention. Steam curled upward from the teacup, carrying with it the fragrance of chamomile, mellow and sweet. She lifted it carefully, wrapping her hands around the warm ceramic, letting the heat soak into her palms. When she took her first sip, the taste was gentle but full, like the memory of summer fields drifting through the stillness of the night. She closed her eyes as she swallowed, allowing the warmth to spread inside her, releasing a tension she hadn't even known she was holding. She sank slowly into the chair by the window, setting the cup in her lap, watching the faint trails of steam rise and vanish into the dim air. The inn shifted ever so slightly beneath her, rocking with the water's movements. At first she was aware of the motion, the soft sway from side to side. But soon, it became part of her, as natural as the beating of her own heart. The longer she sat, the more she felt herself drifting, not away from herself, but toward a deeper stillness within. The quiet was not empty. It was filled with small, comforting details, the glow of the lamp dancing against the walls, the faint scent of lavender that seemed to come from the very wood, the softness of the quilt waiting across the room. She thought of her journey, of the days and nights that had carried her here, but the memories slipped away before they could take shape. The inn seemed to dissolve them, leaving her only with this moment, this calm, this sense that she had arrived exactly where she needed to be. Her eyelids grew heavier. She lifted the teacup once more, drinking deeply, and then set it back onto the tray. Outside, the moon hung steady in the dark sky, its reflection broken by the slow rhythm of the water. She let her gaze soften, no longer focusing on any one thing, but letting the scene blur and melt together. It was as though the lake itself was cradling her, rocking her gently, whispering that there was nothing more to do, nothing more to hold, nothing more to carry. The inn was alive with peace, and she felt herself becoming part of it, her breath matching the rhythm of the waves, her body loosening with every passing moment, her thoughts dissolving like mist. She leaned back in the chair, her hands resting loosely on her lap, her entire being caught between waking and dreaming, suspended in the quiet of the floating inn. The night deepened, and with it the silence grew softer, richer, as though the world outside the window had been wrapped in velvet. She sat unmoving, the gentle rocking of the inn lulling her further inward, her breath slow and unhurried. The lamplight flickered faintly, casting rippling shadows across the wooden walls, as if the inn itself carried a quiet heartbeat that echoed through its beams. Her gaze drifted to the water beyond the glass, where the moon shimmered across the surface in broken silver lines. The reflections shifted with the current, flowing and fading, forming patterns that seemed to speak in a language older than words. She watched as though entranced, her thoughts slipping away with every ripple. It felt less like looking at water and more like staring into something infinite, something that was holding her, welcoming her, drawing her gently into its rhythm. The air inside the room grew softer, infused with a warmth that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. The faint scent of lavender deepened, mingled now with something cooler, like fresh rain carried on the breeze. She inhaled, letting the fragrance wash through her, and with every breath, she felt herself loosen further, as if each inhalation unfastened a knot and each exhale set it free. The inn shifted again, just barely, a slow sway that moved through her body as though she were part of the structure itself, rocking with the water's pulse. Her hands lay still on her lap, her eyelids heavy, but she did not yet close them. She did not want to lose the view of the lake, nor the strange awareness that seemed to fill the room now. It was not silence she felt around her, but presence, a deep, unseen stillness that seemed to be listening with her, breathing with her, resting with her. She thought she heard a sound. Not footsteps, not voices, but something more subtle. The faintest echo of strings, a tone like a lullaby, played far away. She tilted her head slightly, straining to listen, and though the melody never sharpened into clarity, it lingered in the air, as if the walls themselves hummed a song meant only for her. The vibration of it seemed to move through the floorboards, up the chair, into her chest, until it merged with the slow beat of her own heart. She let her eyes drift closed. The rocking, the whispers of sound, the scent of herbs and water, all of it folded together, weaving a cocoon around her. The boundaries of her body seemed to dissolve, and she felt herself becoming part of the lake, part of the inn, part of the silence itself. There was no hurry, no wait, no thought left to hold. In that moment, she understood why travelers spoke of this place as if it were more than wood and stone. It was alive, not with bustling movement, but with stillness, a living calm that seemed to wait patiently for weary souls to arrive. It offered no questions, no demands, only rest. And as she leaned deeper into the chair, the steady rocking carrying her further and further away, she surrendered to it, letting the inn cradle her as though she had been expected all along. The darkness outside thickened, the lake turning into a vast sheet of shadow, broken only by the silver trail of moonlight that quivered across its surface. She sat in the chair by the window, her body still but not stiff, the slow sway of the inn carrying her like a small boat adrift on gentle waves. Each creak of the timbers beneath her was soft, familiar, as though the building itself sighed in time with her breath. The rhythm soothed her, wrapping her deeper into the quiet. Her gaze stayed fixed on the water. At first, she saw only the reflection of the moon, a clear circle that fractured and reformed with every ripple. But the longer she stared, the more she thought she saw shapes within the pattern's lines that curled like smoke, swirls that seemed to fold into one another. They were fleeting, dissolving as soon as she tried to focus, but the impression lingered, as if the lake were sketching secret messages only half meant to be read. She blinked slowly, her eyelids heavy, her thoughts like loose threads slipping through her grasp. The tea's warmth still lingered in her body, flowing out through her arms and legs in waves of comfort. The air inside the room felt charged with a softness that was almost tangible, as though the quiet itself had a texture. She drew in a slow breath, and with it came lavender and honey, cedar and water. The fragrance seemed to seep into her chest, loosening something tight that had lived there too long. The inn swayed again, a nearly imperceptible motion that nonetheless rolled through her entire being. It was the kind of movement that asked nothing of her, only encouraged her to let go, to match its pace. She realized she was no longer holding herself upright. Her body had given in, leaning back into the chair, her hands resting loosely, her breathing slower than she could remember. She felt suspended, as if she were floating not in a building, but in the water itself. Her weight dissolved into the rhythm of the lake. From somewhere within the inn came a sound. It was not sharp enough to startle her, nor clear enough to be distinct. It was something between a vibration and a whisper, like the faint pluck of strings heard from a distance. She tilted her head slightly, listening, and though the sound faded before it could take shape, its impression lingered in her chest, a note that seemed to harmonize with her own heartbeat. It was as though the inn itself sang quietly to her, a lullaby without words, meant only to guide her deeper into stillness. Her eyelids fluttered, her vision softening. The edges of the room blurred, the golden lamplight bleeding into the wood until it all seemed to glow with one steady warmth. She no longer cared where the light ended and the shadows began. She no longer cared about the hours of her journey or the weight she had carried to this place. Those thoughts seemed to dissolve into the hush, slipping away as easily as ripples fade into water. She closed her eyes. In the darkness behind her lids, she still felt the rocking of the inn, a steady sway that cradled her more deeply than any bed had in years. She could still hear the whisper of the lake, could still taste the echo of chamomile on her tongue, could still sense the quiet hum that seemed to belong not only to the inn, but to the night itself. She surrendered to it without resistance, letting the calm carry her. And in that surrender, she realized the inn was not just shelter. It was alive with patience, alive with rest, a place that had been waiting not just for travelers, but for her. Sleep gathered at the edges of her mind like a tide, slow and irresistible. She leaned deeper into the chair, her body weightless in the soft cradle of the inn's motion. The lamp on the bedside table flickered, its glow steady but blurred through her heavy lashes. She did not open her eyes again, for the quiet around her had become more vivid than anything she could see. The lake whispered beneath the floor, its rhythm even and unchanging, as if the whole world had been reduced to the sound of water and the gentle breath of night. Her thoughts wandered in loose fragments, no longer following the order of the day. She saw images that rose and fell like reflections on the lake, half-formed, luminous, and gone before she could grasp them. The shifting patterns of moonlight became pathways in her mind, stretching out into places unknown yet strangely familiar. She followed without effort, as though the current of the inn carried her into those spaces. The air seemed thicker now, rich with calm. The faint scent of lavender clung to her still, weaving with the coolness of night air drifting in through the cracks of the window. Somewhere deep in the building, a timber groaned softly, not with strain, but with a kind of contented sigh, as though the inn itself shared in the act of resting. Each sound, each breath, each motion folded into one another until there was no difference between her body and the space around her. Her breathing slowed, each inhale a little deeper, each exhale a little longer, until it matched the rhythm of the rocking. The line between waking and dreaming blurred. She could not tell if she was still in the chair, still in the glowing room, or already elsewhere. Perhaps she had drifted onto the water itself, lying back on the silver surface of the lake, the stars bending low to watch over her. Perhaps the inn floated not only on water, but across the boundaries of time, carrying her into places she had never seen but always longed for. The faint hum returned, the suggestion of music, distant but constant, like the memory of a lullaby. It slipped through her thoughts like silk, gentle and unbroken, until she no longer heard it as sound but felt it as presence. It lulled her further, deeper, into a place where words no longer mattered, where only sensation remained. Warmth, motion, stillness, release. Her head rested against the back of the chair. Her arms were heavy, her legs light, her body surrendered completely to the softness that held her. The last threads of awareness thinned, fragile as cobwebs, until they, too, dissolved into the silence. The inn rocked gently, and the lake kept its patient rhythm. She drifted into sleep as if carried by both, her dreams waiting just beyond the veil of night, steady and unhurried, as if they had been prepared long before she arrived. The quiet grew heavier, as if the night itself had thickened around her. Her body had melted into the chair, her hands resting loose in her lap, her head tilting slightly as though gravity no longer had much hold. The inn swayed with the rhythm of the water, each motion so subtle and so steady that she felt herself rocking inward, deeper, carried on invisible waves that matched the slow rise and fall of her breath. The lamp glowed on the bedside table, but its light no longer seemed separate from the shadows. Everything blended together in a soft wash of gold and brown, a haze that dulled the edges of the world. Her thoughts no longer followed straight lines. They broke apart like petals on the surface of a stream, drifting wherever the current carried them. A memory flickered, perhaps of a road she had walked, a town she had passed, but it was weightless now, dissolving before it could take form. In its place came new images, faint and luminous, like reflections of stars seen in rippling water. Shapes and fragments that did not belong to her past, but to something quieter, something that belonged only to the space she was entering. The air around her was alive with softness. The lavender was still there, grounding her in its calm sweetness, but beneath it was the cool scent of water, clean and endless. A breath of night wind brushed against her skin, drifting through a crack in the window, carrying the faint sound of the lake. The lapping below the floorboards was steady, unchanging, and in it she could hear the same rhythm as her own heart. It was no longer outside of her. It was inside, a steady echoing pulse that rocked her more deeply than the movement of the inn. A sound rose, so faint she could not be certain it was real. It was not the groan of the timbers, or the whisper of the breeze. It was lighter, more delicate, like the distant pluck of strings or the lingering hum of a voice that never needed to breathe. She did not try to listen too hard. She simply allowed it to exist, let it drift into her like the scent of lavender, until it was part of her breathing, part of her body, part of the stillness. Her eyes closed without her choosing. Behind them, the lake still shimmered, but now it stretched into infinity, carrying the reflection of the moon like a pathway. She felt as though she were lying on the surface itself, weightless, carried by water that never resisted her, water that held her perfectly. She could not tell whether she was dreaming or simply sinking into rest, and the difference no longer mattered. The rocking, the warmth, the scent, the faint hum, they merged into one endless thread, winding gently through her, carrying her further away from the noise of her waking mind. Her breathing deepened, slow and steady, each exhale like a door closing softly behind her. She no longer noticed her body. She no longer noticed time. She was only the drifting, the rocking, the endless hush. The inn held her as though it had always been waiting for her, and the lake kept its patient rhythm, drawing her deeper into the embrace of sleep. She found herself standing once more within the floating inn, but it was no longer the quiet wooden place she had entered earlier. Now it glowed with a silvery radiance, every plank of wood polished by moonlight, every lantern shimmering with a flame that seemed to sway like water. The floor beneath her was not steady timber, but a glassy surface that rippled as though the lake itself had risen to become the foundation. Yet, though it should have felt strange, it did not. It felt safe, as if this place were made to cradle her, whether in waking or in dreams. Through the tall windows, the lake stretched endlessly. Stars lay scattered across its surface, as though the heavens had poured themselves into the water, and the horizon was lost in a blur of mist and light. The inn swayed gently, but now its movement seemed deliberate, like a lullaby being sung by the lake itself. She walked slowly down a corridor that did not exist before, her footsteps soundless, her body feather-light. Doors lined the hallway, each one glowing faintly as if they held secrets behind them. She touched one, and the wood warmed beneath her hand. When it opened, she glimpsed not a room, but a meadow under starlight, the grass moving in an invisible breeze. Another door showed a forest with branches that dripped with soft golden light, and yet another revealed a small library filled with books that hummed with quiet energy. Each space felt like an invitation, but she did not step through. She only drifted along, knowing she was free to wander anywhere the stream inn might carry her. At the end of the corridor, a wide balcony opened onto the water. She stepped out and found the inn was gliding silently across the lake, leaving no wake, no sound. The moon hung directly above, larger than she had ever seen it, its reflection stretching like a silver path across the water. She leaned against the railing, her eyes heavy but her heart light, and for a moment she thought she could hear voices, soft, kind, timeless, whispering like the wind across the lake. They said nothing clear, only the rhythm of comfort, words made of silence itself. The inn rocked once more, slower than before, and her body seemed to dissolve into the sway. The silver path on the lake beckoned her further into stillness. She closed her eyes, not out of choice, but because the dream carried her there, and the last thing she felt was the weightless embrace of water and moonlight cradling her. Then there was only the rhythm of her breath, the softness of the night, and the deep, endless drift into sleep. The floating inn seemed to draw her deeper into its embrace, as if the walls and windows themselves had softened into a dream. The light within had grown gentler still, lanterns glowing with a pulse that rose and fell like a steady heartbeat. Every flicker seemed timed with her breath, slow and calm, as though the building itself was alive, breathing alongside her. The floor beneath her bare feet no longer felt like polished wood but like cool, smooth water that somehow supported her weight. She felt no fear, only a surrendering calm that wrapped around her like a warm blanket. She wandered without direction, her steps carrying her along a path she hadn't noticed before. The corridor curved in an endless circle, its walls made of mist and its doors shimmering like fragments of other lives. She brushed her hand against them as she passed, and each one released a soft echo laughter, music, the hush of rain, the faint lull of waves. It was as though every door held a memory of peace, waiting for someone to step through and claim it. She did not need to open them. The knowing was enough. Their comfort seeped into her simply by being near. At last, the hallway opened onto a vast chamber with no ceiling at all, only the infinite sky. The stars above hung low, close enough that they appeared to sway like lanterns. They reflected perfectly in the stillness of the lake below, so that she stood between two skies, one above and one beneath her. The end drifted without sound, carrying her into the center of this mirrored world. The silence was not empty, it was whole, complete, like the quiet of a heart that has no more need to search. A chair appeared at the edge of the open deck, carved from the same wood as the inn. She lowered herself into it, her body sinking deeply, every muscle unwinding in surrender. The lake stretched outward endlessly, and she let her eyes rest on the silver path cast by the moon. The light quivered gently on the water, beckoning her inward. Her eyelids fluttered, heavier with each breath, until keeping them open was no longer possible. She felt herself slipping into a space that was neither fully waking nor fully gone, a place of complete release. The rocking of the inn grew softer, almost imperceptible, as though the lake itself had stilled for her. The voices she had heard before returned, only this time they were closer, clearer, yet still wordless. They were the voices of the night, the voices of the water, the voices of her own quiet mind. Together they formed a rhythm, slow and steady, a lullaby beyond language. Her thoughts dissolved, one by one, until there was nothing left but breath and heartbeat. The inn, the lake, the sky, all of it folded into one vast embrace. She drifted, lighter than air, quieter than silence, carried gently into a depth where no worry could follow. The world of the floating and faded into the rhythm of dreams, and she was gone, fully, peacefully into sleep.
And so, dear dreamer, our story finds its gentle close, but your night continues calm and unbroken. Let your thoughts drift, as lightly as clouds across a moonlit sky. Let your body sink, as deeply as roots into the quiet earth. There is no need to hold on, no need to listen further, only to rest. For the story remains with you, carrying you through the night, until morning's light comes softly to call. Good night, and sweet dreams. From the Midnight Library. Crescent moon sparkles, break time equals 2000/.